Kia ora koto katoa. Welcome to our day 3 of our ICA Hub here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This particular session is the interactive poster session of the Health Communication Division. And we will particularly attend to those presentations that address some form of inequality and questions of justice, particularly at the intersections of race, class, and gender. The final presentation for this particular poster session, and I really encourage you to look at these interactive posters. There are some excellent topics that are covered from different parts of the globe, and I'm really thrilled to see the diversity that is reflected here. The final presentation is by Mohan Mahbubur Rahman, who is also here with us today. I will play the video, but he is also here to engage in that dialogue further. His presentation is titled Negotiations of Health Among Rohingya Refugees in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, a culture-centered approach to health and care.
This is Md Mahbubur Rahman. I am now doing PhD on Communication and Journalism at Massey University, New Zealand. My extended abstract on negotiations of health among Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, a culture-centered approach to health and care, has been accepted by ICA 2021. Now, I would like to present my paper. For this, I would like to share my presentation. At first, I would like to say something on Rohingyas or Rohingyas. The international media call the people as Rohingyas, but the people identify themselves as Rohingyas. Rohingyas are the Muslim ethnic minority people living in the Rakhine state of Myanmar for centuries. Unfortunately, the Rohingya people are not recognized by the Myanmar authority as citizens of that country. Myanmar is previously known as Burma, and the Rakhine state is previously known as Arakan state. According to the UN, the Rohingyas are now the largest stateless population of the world. An estimated 1 million Rohingya people lived in Rakhine state of Myanmar before the 2017 Rohingya genocide in Rakhine state. However, the actual population figure of Rohingya cannot be independently verified due to the ongoing restrictions of movements in the Rakhine state. International observers believe that now there are 600,000 Rohingyas still living in Myanmar. Of them, 200,000 living as IDP or internally displaced persons in different government camps of Myanmar since 2012. So now 600,000 Rohingyas are living in Myanmar, but double the figure, that is 1.2 million Rohingyas, have fled to neighboring Bangladesh. They are currently staying in various refugee camps of Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. Cox's Bazar is the southern east district of Bangladesh. Myanmar got its independence in 1948, and at that time, 135 ethnic groups has been recognized by the government, but Rohingya people were excluded from the 135 ethnic groups. They are denied their citizenship rights since 1982 citizenship law. The Rohingyas claim themselves that they are living in that country since the 8th century, but the Myanmar government did not recognize that. Here is the figure where from Myanmar, the Rohingya people are fleeing to Bangladesh, they are fleeing to India, they are fleeing to Pakistan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, or Indonesia. Since 25th August 2017, an estimated assault by the Myanmar army against the Rohingyas made the ethnic group flee droves to Bangladesh. Within 3 months of that year, more than 740,000 Rohingyas fled to Bangladesh. It was the latest and largest exodus of Rohingyas to Bangladesh. It is not the first or last exodus. Before that, they came to Bangladesh in 1977, 1991, 1996, or even today. Before 2017, more than 300,000 Rohingyas have been living in the Cox's Bazar area of Bangladesh. Now, altogether, more than 1.2 million Rohingyas are now living in Bangladesh. Rohingya refugees are forced to share toilets and other facilities, and it may be mentioned here that up to 20 people may use a single bathroom in the Rohingya camps. My involvement with the Rohingya refugees, I was responsible for producing news reports on Rohingya crisis for the state-run Bangladesh television since the August 2017 exodus. I visited 2 times the Rohingya camps in 2018 and 2020. In 2018, I covered the UN Secretary General's visit to Rohingya camps, and in February 2020, just before coming to New Zealand, I visited the Rohingya camps again and took few in-depth interviews of the Rohingya refugees living in the camps. During my interview, I asked the Rohingya people, "What does health mean to you?" But the Rohingya people could not answer it clearly. They said they did not think much about their health and healthcare. Actually, they had been busy managing food and shelter after fleeing for their lives. One Rohingya people mentioned, "We are busy with our immediate needs, not with our health." I also asked them, "Where do you go when you face any health problems at the camps?" They mentioned, when they experienced any health issues, the people generally go primary healthcare centers, health posts at the camps. And at the camps, there are 38 primary healthcare centers, 97 health posts, 23 special facilities, and 7 field hospitals. But all the treatment, medications, and diagnostic tests are free of cost at the camp. It is another experience of 55-year-old Rohingya female. She mentioned that, "I am an elderly person, but the clinic people did not take a good care of me. They asked me to wait for another 2 hours. At 12 p.m., they started to close the center. I went for 3 days, and all the occasions I had to return without any medicines." It is the experience of 55-year-old Rohingya female who is living there. Culture Center approach is a meta-theoretical framework designed by Professor Mohan Dutta and that explores the interactions among structure, culture, and agency. CCA dealing with the marginalized people like the Rohingya people who face disparities and voicelessness. CCA works through interaction between structure, culture, and agency. To address the issue, it is necessary to culturally centering communication and to the communities at the people margins of the margins like the Rohingya refugees. In CCA, listening to the voices of the voiceless is the entry point for addressing health disparities. And what is the relationship between CCA and Rohingya Health? Rohingya refugees have the ongoing health challenges, as I observed that they face challenges of hunger, malnutrition, watery diarrhea, and now they are facing problems with the COVID-19 with their everyday accounts of trauma. Rohingya women, who are more than 52% of the camp population, experience sexual exploitation. In this paper, we argue that structurally constituted challenges to accessing health and negotiating care of the Rohingya refugees are constituted amidst the erasure of their identity, that is, their statelessness. The government of Bangladesh does not recognize Rohingyas as refugees and do not give them permission to go outside of the camps. Bangladesh government identifies the Rohingyas as forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals, or FDMN, a designate that denies them refugee status and associated rights. This can be juxtaposed with the Myanmar government's identification of Rohingyas as illegal Bengali immigrants to Myanmar, an identity that forms the very basis of the organized persecution against the Rohingyas in Myanmar. In our paper, we theorize the interplay between identity and state in organizing health and care, depicting the ways in which the erasure of identity is tied to the erasure of access to care. And that's all about my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mahbubur. You have presented with us a Rohingya context and applying the culture-centered approach to look at the politics of health and care. I will begin by asking you a question and then open up the floor to questions from the audience. So in this particular paper, you talk about the interplays of identity, statelessness, and healthcare. So I would like you to talk a little bit more about the role of statelessness and citizenship as an organizing feature of health communication.
I think identity is very much related with human rights, but Rohingya people do not have any identity. They are stateless, I think, for last four decades. In 1982, Burma enacted a law that is the Myanmar Citizenship Act, and through the Citizenship Act, they became stateless. And now the Rohingya people are the largest stateless population of the world. As they are stateless, when they are forced to come to the Bangladesh, they are also do not have any identity. And even Bangladesh government do not give them the refugee status. So they do not have any identity, actually. And even the child born in abroad, they are also stateless. So I think that as they do not have any identity, this statelessness becomes the main factor so that they are not getting the proper care even by any countries of the world.
Thank you. We'll open up the floor to questions.
I'll just make a comment. One of the things I liked about this panel, I also liked about the last panel we had on from the ORCOM division, the research escalator, is I like these kinds of panels because they're diverse in what they're focusing on. They're not all, there's nothing wrong when they're all on the same subject. But I like there's different theoretical approaches, different methodological approaches. And so it's one of the things I really enjoyed about this one is we see different contexts and so on. And so it's one of the good things. So it also shows the depth of health communication. And I think we saw that earlier with organizational communication in the earlier panel. But we see similar trends is one of the things. We see issues here. We still see issues whether we're looking at it from more of a, communication, theory of communication identity or communication identity theory. So identity theory is CIT, or looking at CCA and so on, is we still see issues of power, whether we're looking at, say, from a positivistic or critical approach. We still see that overriding everything in some way. And so we still see common threads throughout things. So it's kind of nice to see that just from different approaches. Yeah.
Yeah, and that isn't that exciting, this idea that you can approach very similar kinds of questions almost with very different methodological orientations and commitments.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess one more comment I might make also is one thing I think we should reflect on a little bit too, particularly now with collecting data during COVID, is really reflect on how COVID is influencing how our participants respond. And even in social science, like if you're doing just like Likert scales and things like that, like I know one or two of the participants, one commented that she used Qualtrics, the other didn't say how the data was collected, just that it was an online survey panel. So it could have been MTER, Qualtrics, or something else. But even with that type of data, whether it's that or interviewing participants, there's still this impact of, are people responding differently because of COVID? And does that create a power dichotomy or some sort of power issue? Because if we're doing things via Qualtrics, one of the things I can say, we're doing a lot of Qualtrics work right now, is from talking with our colleagues who work with Qualtrics or our Qualtrics contacts, a lot more people are wanting to do Qualtrics panels now because more and more people in certain countries need the money. And so more and more people are signing up to do it. So I wonder if that's also influencing our data panels, because more and more people are wanting to do it. More and more people are wanting to be M-Turkers because they're needing money. And so I'm wondering from a purely, validity and reliability point of view, and from a comparability point of view, comparing, say, face-to-face panels versus online panels, if that's at all changing the composition in some way, even just slightly, just a little bit of error on either the good or bad side, and even from an interview point of view, if that's something people can't consciously understand, but if it's still there, which we've talked about in the past couple of days, but I wonder if that's something we should always be aware of, which is why more and more IRBs or institutional review boards or human subject review boards are asking us to be aware and to discuss and at least be cognizant of the fact that we're collecting data in a time now where people could be more and more vulnerable because they may not be dealing with COVID, but they could have family members dealing with COVID, their environment, their job, or other things could be more at risk. So.
What a great point. You know, that also raises this other question, Stephen, and you kind of touched upon it, which is about precarity and the ways in which COVID has introduced precarity and how that then relates to platform capital. You know, so there are these kinds of platforms like Amazon, MTurk, which have become sort of the sites for just sustaining for some people as they have lost jobs and, you know.
It also becomes sustained for academia, where now it's getting harder and harder, and this isn't a dig on our journals and our discipline, but kind of is. It's also become now where if you do a survey among snowball sample, like in quantitative research, for some of our top journals, whether they be NCA, ICA, AJMC, and others, if you do a snowball sample among participants, say you collect even 500 participants, you're going to have more and more reviewers question that and say, well, why didn't you do an MTurk? Why didn't you do a Qualtrics? Why didn't you do this? This is better kind of data than a convenient sample. Those are still convenient samples, but they seem to have more validity to them, but they're just as precarious as, say, doing a convenient sample, especially in a quantitative sense. But our disciplines have, for some reason, validated these types, but we have to pay for those. But the ones that, you know, sitting there in your university and collecting 200 undergraduate students in a communication lab for extra credit still is considered just as valid. But then doing a convenient sample of your colleagues and then going from others and back and boom, 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 like that is seen as questionable still. But yet we trust these firms. We don't even know who they're getting. And so that's a whole other ball of wax when it comes open about, you know, this. But for some reason we validated that because we pay for it. Which is whole.
Yes, and which also, again, you know, we are talking about the global South. I mean, who has the money
for it?
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, they're going to pay thousands of dollars to get 200 people, so they have to get their, you know, their fauna to you know, to collect, you know, to do surveys for them, but they're not seen as legitimate enough.
Yes, I mean, no, I mean, it's a real conversation to have, particularly, I think, in terms of the conversations that we are having now about open science and data sharing and all that, in terms of exactly what you're raising, that who can afford particular kinds of quality of data, and also the ways in which then that privileges platform capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mahbub, I wanted to ask you another question, which relates to how you relate to the Rohingya refugees. I understand that you worked as a journalist, right? You go into a camp, say, for instance, and you set up these interviews and you interview refugee participants. So how do you go about building that trust so that you can actually create a space for doing the interviews?
I have working experience with the Rohingya people when I have been working as a news producer in Bangladesh television, and I just share my experience how I work with the refugees. The second time, in generally, journalists and general people are not allowed to go into the camps. So at first we have to take the permission from the refugee center that is settled in Cox's Bazar, RRC. And taking permission from them, the local journalists who mainly work with the Rohingya refugees at the camp, they are very much close to the refugee people, and they know how to go into the camp. So taking help from the local journalists, I can enter into the Rohingya camps, and as they are working regularly at the camp, they know how to pick up the participants, how we can share their experience. So I managed that with taking the help of the local journalists who are working, settled in mainly the Cox's Bazar. With their help, I can take the interviews.
So you work with interlocutors of some form, right? How do you, because, Rohingya refugees are perhaps one of the most disenfranchised, truly at the margins of the margins because of the ongoing genocide, right? How do you ensure to work in a way that the relationship is not extractive, where you just have gathered some data and, come out of the community without really contributing to the struggles of the people?
That's and last time when I entered to the camp, some Rohingya people also mentioned that the people are coming and taking our interviews. Our interviews are shown in the media, but our situation is not improved. And that is very difficult to handle that situation because they want to just bring from their precarious situation. They want that. I also some ask Rohingya people whether they want to go back to their country. Initially, some mentioned that no, we do not want to go back. But as my friend working in the state media, at that time they changed their mind and tell, no, if Burmese government gave us the citizenship and other rights, we will definitely go back. But their main, if I consider their main thinking, they are not also interested to go back to their country because they know if they go back to their country, again, violence, persecution, etc. will go with them. So it's a little bit tough to how the extract their experiences in the camp.
One of the things, Mahbub, with our work we have noticed is certainly, this pattern in India, in Bangladesh, where the statelessness is intergenerational, right? So it connects to the young, the children, being able to or not being able to go to schools, get an education, mobility, to be able to get jobs,
they are not, in camps, they are not permitted to take the education. Initially, the Rohingya people just get some technical education and up to class 8, they are permitted now. So the new generation, they do not get any education and they are not getting any job. So even they do not know how it will be the future. And that's why UNICEF mentioned that they may be the lost generation, the Rohingya people. And Bangladesh government also do not know what is the future of the Rohingya people. Though government think it is a temporary problem for Bangladesh government, but I think it may be extended further because the Myanmar government is not interested to take the citizens back to their country because they believe that they are the Bengali immigrants. Though Rohingya people staying in the Rakhine state or Arakan state for centuries, even from the 4th or 7th century. Though at that time the term Rohingya was not used, but the Muslims population, they are staying there from the 7th century. But now the Myanmar government recognized their citizenship. They are now stateless, just they do not have any rights, as if they do not have the right to have their rights.
Franco, Elena, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that looking at all that and in general health disparities, especially in terms of refugees, if you add onto that the COVID-19 crisis, the lack of vaccines, the lack of attention from the governments which sort of should look after those refugees. It's just horrible to think what is going on. So
how they connected together. I'm really fascinated about that.
It just shows different aspects of health issues and health communication, and how if we try to just address from the sort of Eurocentric, Western-centric perspective, the issue of vaccine hesitancy, we will not go too far because of the structural inequalities in the whole sort of foundation that brings the issue of medical mistrust from all those communities. Yeah.
So I agree with everything that has been said, but also so important to move away from a Western perspective of thinking, of doing ways. You know, this is how it's been done for so many years, but actually, is that the right way? Is that the only way? And I think we do need to start opening up to actually allow different perspectives to actually be accepted into mainstream as to normalize that as well. Yeah, and that, yeah, I just really like the presentations, all just how they all fitted into each other, and just how diverse they were, and yet the same messages coming through. Yeah, and I think thank you for that, Mahbub. Just so disturbing, actually, from a human rights point of view. Well, when will they get an identity? You know, what happens next? Are they just going to continue living there?
Yeah.
What future do the children have? You know, so many being born a year. What happens to them? You know, yeah, they can go to school for X number of years, but then what do the teenagers do, and the adults? Just quite disturbing, actually. Instead of what can the world do, I suppose. Are we just watching? You know, yeah. It's disturbing, yeah.
And Franco, yet what is so powerful is, you know, as the pandemic started to unfold, we were writing about the structural context. But then what was really amazing is that as it unfolded, it appeared that the camps were one of the places where the infections were controlled.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
You know, so it's really also interesting in terms of innovation, and amidst these deep structural inequalities, what kinds of community mobilizing and organizing happened to actually address the spread. No, Mahbub?
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. So thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for your work with the Rohingya. Yeah.
Stephen, did you want to add anything else?
Well, I'm just wondering, if we look to what's happening, we talked about this in so many other panels, but I wonder what historical precedent there is for this. Is even if we look to, say, the 1970s and 60s, if we look to, say, the Hmong population, I know it's much smaller, but I wonder if there is some similarity there. And so I'm thinking even further back, as we've talked about this so many other times, past few days, but it'd be interesting to look to that and see really how did the world respond in those ways, what happened to that group since then, and, you know, look to those types of, look historically. Is I keep wanting to go back there where I'm not trying to diminish this, but this isn't unique. I'm sorry to be blunt. In some ways, there are unique attributes, but it's not unique, which is sad. And so I know people talk about, you know, it's a crisis. It is. But
it's a history.
It's not the first one, and it's not going to be the last. It's just a different context.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I hate to put it in that kind of box, but if we look back, we can see others just like it. And I think that's where we're maybe not part of the conversation yet, is to talk about that. Yeah. Even in the news reports, as journalists, I think talking about that, saying we see this, we see this, we see this. And then how can our journalists even learn from that? And some of the journalist reports I've seen, I've almost turned off because it's almost like they're saying this is the first time this has ever happened. And it's just like, it almost feels like sensationalism in that way, because it's not.
And then the question is, how do we mobilize from these registers? And it goes back to our ICA theme, to build alternative registers of care, so that this doesn't happen, right? And it doesn't happen in the future. Yeah. Did you all want to add anything?
I think the topic is very important, and yeah, it's so exciting to see how the research can help those people.
And that's the real question, right? How can research support
the marginalized group?
Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions from our audience? Okay, I want to take this moment to thank you all for joining us to the Health Communication Interactive Poster session. I do hope that those of you that are watching will go onto the ICA site and look at the other presentations. We have an array of excellent presentations in the interactive sessions. And as many of us commented around this room, it's really exciting to see such a wide diversity and such a robust quality of papers in this session.